Welcome in everyone to the Payne and Drain Show. It's been a little bit since we recorded an episode, but now that we're a bit over a week into free agency, we felt it was time to return and talk about some of the moves the Lions have made because there is a lot to talk about. A lot has happened over the last couple of weeks as free agency has got underway. Players are gone, players have been brought in, and a couple of guys remain unsigned. And obviously, everyone is reacting very rationally to everything that has happened. So, welcome in, everyone. My name is Zach Payne. I'm one half of this podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my co host, Alex Drain. And, Alex, how are we doing a week into free agency?
There was a time at the end of last year where I felt like I was more on the negative end of the fan base. Like I remember, I think it was at the end of the Pittsburgh game, I was tweeting about how much I did not enjoy watching the team play, and there were some people sort of arguing in opposition to that. But now I feel like I'm more strongly to the positive side of the fan base after the offseason so far because I seem to be one of the few people that is not super alarmed and generally haven't liked a lot of the things that they've done. But obviously, there haven't been a lot of big names, so it's just kind of parsing between. But as a whole, I'm in a decent mood. They're going to need to really fortify some things through the draft, but I think that's how it was always going to be. And in terms of patching up depth, I think it's been a pretty solid job so far. So we'll get into that, but I'm in better spirits, I guess, than a lot of the fan base.
Yeah, it's. I always kind of have to remind myself of where we are because I understand the sentiment that the Lions went from being this division winner back-to-back years, NFC Championship, 15 wins, and then they just kind of fell on their face a little bit and they missed the playoffs. Obviously, they finished last in the NFC North, still going 9-8, which I mean, as far as last place finishes in the division go. I don't know. You literally can't do much better than having a winning record but still being last. So there's a lot, like people are souring on this regime a little bit, specifically on Brad Holmes. And it's just weird because on the one hand, I get it, right? It was definitely a major step back to miss the playoffs and slide from first to last. However, this is the floor, guys. 9-8 is the floor now. That's where this franchise is at. And I feel like people aren't appreciating just how far we've come in the last 4 years under this regime to the point where it's like everyone's like ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater whenever one thing goes wrong. The Brad Holmes discourse has gotten very bizarre because this is how he's always operated. I don't know why people are surprised that he's not taking big swings in free agency and that he's focusing on the draft, but alas, here we are, I guess.
Yeah, I do think there's a bit of an element of sort of what were you expecting, but at the end of the day, uh, people want something exciting, and there's certainly been a storyline of some fan favorites leaving, so I do think that's probably a part of it.
Well, speaking of those fan favorites, we'll just dive into them. The Lions obviously parting with a couple of big names that people love this offseason. The first of which, this one is kind of a deja vu type of situation. David Montgomery, after the season that he had, where we, along with many people in Lions fandom, were complaining that he wasn't used enough, and he agreed and he requested a trade to a place where he could get a starting job again because he feels, rightly so, that he is a starting caliber running back. And the Lions said, look, we'd love to have you here, but if you find a place that you really want to go, we will help facilitate that trade. And so the Lions agreed to a trade with the Houston Texans. Now, originally, this was reported as a Montgomery for a fifth round pick trade. And then, like 40 minutes later, it came out, nope, it's actually a fourth, a seventh, and offensive lineman, Juice Scruggs. And by the sounds of it, a team, possibly the Denver Broncos, by the sounds of it, swooped in at the last minute to try to top the Texans' offer, which caused the Texans to raise their offer. And the Lions get pretty good value for a aging veteran running back, even though we all love him.
Yeah, I mean, was pretty consistent on this at the end of the season, and then probably in our last episode too. I don't remember if we talked about it, but it's been my point from the beginning. Like, I would have preferred to keep Montgomery just because I thought he was really valuable in what he did. But if you were going to use him the way they did last year, it made no sense to roster a player like that in that fashion. And the guy they got to replace him will fit that role much better because Montgomery just, we've seen what he can do in a larger workload. So, and it makes sense why the player would be unhappy too. And from that lens, it made sense to move off of him. And they kind of hinted at it at the Brad Holmes press conference at the end of the season. Then it took a little bit for it to happen. But at the end of the day, they did get a good return. And you can go back to the arc of the running back room and sort of conclude that the Lions did a really good job with this saga. They had Jamal Williams. He did a lot of good work for the team. They let him go, signs a contract that was definitely a little pricey, ends up not replicating what he did in Detroit, in New Orleans, which we all could have predicted, but
17
uh,
touchdowns wasn't a repeatable outcome.
especially not with the current Saints. But they get out from under that and they sign David Montgomery and they get 3 good years, 2 really exceptional years out of him. And then they sell reasonably high. And at the end of the day, you can kind of view it as they purchased 2 draft picks in free agency. They got a player, paid him 3 years, then they flip him for some picks. And for a team that had diluted their pick total a little bit. Like it had definitely, or depleted, I guess is the better verb. They were down a couple picks. They get 2 back, and a useful offensive lineman who's played a little bit in the NFL. Not a guy I would really want to start, but can fill in your depth in a reasonable manner. If you're going to move off of him, this is as good of a return as you could have imagined. So, in the whole, unfortunate to see him go, but this is the path they want to go, and they're going about it in a reasonable manner, at least.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jamal Williams. That's obviously the perfect comp. Fan favorite, beloved by the fan. Like everyone adores him. The coaching staff adores him, but it just didn't make sense for the price tag for what the role was going to be. So you got to move on. And the Lions are now swimming in day three picks heading into this draft. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, Juice Scruggs coming back. You need offensive line depth. He'll probably be the backup center. Probably, I would imagine. I hope that between Scruggs and we'll talk about the other signing they made in a little bit, that the Tate Ratledge at center stuff is dead. Can we please just kill that? I don't know why we keep insisting. It's not going to happen. It's done. So that was David Montgomery. The second one, this one was just full of twists and turns that I was not expecting. Taylor Decker, who we knew at the end of the season it was up in the air whether or not he would be back to play another season. And after the combine, the Lions are like, we'll probably figure it out soon here, but we're gonna need an answer, like long term regardless. And Taylor Decker's like, you know what? I'm gonna lace up the bootstraps one more time. I'm coming back for another year. And then a week later, he's like, by the way, I also want to be released. And that really caught a lot of people off guard. And it sounds like the Lions asked him to take a pay cut. He, as is his right, said, no thanks, I will take my money. And the Lions released him per his request. He's still unsigned as of this recording on Wednesday, March 18th. Don't know what's going on there. Don't know where he's going to end up. Doesn't matter because he's no longer a Lion. I guess, what was your reaction as this saga was kind of unfolding?
This is kind of like the Grandpa Simpson meme this offseason, where like, oh, he's staying. Okay, walk in the door, take off the hat, take off the coat, put it back on, walk out the door. Oh, he's gone a week after he said he was coming back. Okay, I rewind to January, and after that Bears game, he had the long comments with the reporters in the locker room, and that seemed to be tipping his hand towards a retirement. And then when he said he was coming back, I was actually a little surprised just because I had thought based on that he was probably going to retire. So I was like, oh, I guess he's going to have one more year. But internally, I had kind of felt that I was kind of leaning towards wanting him to retire simply because I think the Lions are in a good position with their first round draft pick to take an offensive tackle. Now, you never really want to feel like you're boxed in and you have to do it. And we'll certainly talk about it in the run up to the draft, but it kind of feels like they do. On the other hand, being wherever they are, was it 17th they're picking? Like, you hope that's as high as they will be picking in the next couple drafts, and that thus makes it a perfect time to take your sort of new franchise left tackle, right tackle, etc. So I just kind of had hoped that he would retire because that would line up a little bit and you'd free up some money. So this isn't quite retirement. It isn't exactly the same, but it does open up that hole and creates an opportunity for a transition to a new player. If he had come back and actually planned to start, I wouldn't have been mad or anything. It's just you see where the age curve's kind of going. I think, is he a 94 birthday? So he'd be 32 this year, if I remember correctly. So it's not ancient for a tackle, but he's had a lot of injuries and the play has been slipping for a couple years. So by no means is it the end of the world to lose him, but the way it happened is a bit odd. I will note though, he didn't want to take a pay cut with the Lions. Seems like he's going to be taking a pay cut because today Rasheed Walker, the Packers tackle, signs pretty cheap deal. Decker's still unsigned. I don't know what's happening with that now.
At this point, a week into free agency, I mean, maybe he has something that he's like contemplate. Maybe he's contemplating retirement again. I don't know. But I do wonder if he's kind of holding out to be like, okay, maybe I'll just relax through the draft, through the first round of OTAs, whatever, and see if there's any big tackle injuries that come up in training camp. And if something happens and someone needs a 1 year mercenary left tackle that can be a quality starter, he can join. And if not, he'll kind of let fate decide to retire that way. I don't know. We'll see. Or, I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll swallow his pride if the Lions don't end up taking a tackle in the first round, and maybe the Lions say, you know what? 1 year, why not? Let's kick the can down the road. Who knows? But Taylor Decker, as of now, no longer a Lion. A decade at left tackle there, and now the Lions are looking elsewhere. Although it might be Penei Sewell. Who knows? The Lions just need a tackle in some capacity. We know Sewell is capable of playing either left or right, so that's going to be a bit of a interesting adjustment. I don't, based on the face you're making, I don't know if you're confident in Sewell sliding back over to left, but
I was just thinking about this. Who is the Lions' longest tenured player now? Is it like some of those 2021 guys? Like, is there anyone left from
like
before the Holmes
2020.
era?
Oh, that's a good question because they've overturned basically the entire roster. So
Yeah, I mean, was Tom Kennedy still around when in the
yeah, Tom
Quinn
Kennedy
Trisha?
re-signed. So is Tom Kennedy the longest tenured
Let me
Detroit
look
line?
that one up. But
Be
it's unfortunate to see Decker go just in that sentimental value component because
yeah,
this is a guy that went through the Quinn Trisha era and had some, his rookie year was a pretty fun season where they made the playoffs and had a lot of comebacks. And then he went through some pretty hellish years there for particularly 2018, 19, and 20, and then soldiered through. And even 21 obviously was a terrible season. And then managed to play in some really exciting games and win a couple division titles. So I'll always be standing Taylor Decker, good soldier for this
oh yeah,
team, and gave us a lot of good years. Was never a superstar, was never an all-pro tackle, but was just a solid starter who got the job done most years.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. Just thank you for your service and move on. Speaking of other veterans that have history with this team, the Lions did in fact release Graham Glasgow, so fully just changing of the guard there on some of the parts of the O line, and the youth movement continues to take over. And that brings us into some of the guys that the Lions let go of, or rather chose not to re-sign. The biggest one that really upset people, which again, I don't know where you've been for the last year, but Alex Anzalone signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a 2 year deal worth up to $17 million. dollars. And this is similar to the Decker and Glasgow conversation in that the young guys need their contracts, and the old guys you can't afford to be paying guys into their 30s when you have superstars that are 23, 24 years old. So Anzalone, it's as simple as that. I'm sure the Lions would have liked to keep him, but other guys need to be paid, namely Jack Campbell, who was a first team All Pro this year, and he's going to get the bag. And so Anzalone moves on. And there was a lot of weird tension with the Lions media team on the way out. Anzalone was like retweeting them, being like, all this stuff. We talked about that on the last episode. So that saga just comes to an end. I am surprised he didn't go reunite with Aaron Glenn, but alas, Anzalone, it's done, and the Lions need a new will linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what people were expecting here. He's getting up there in linebacker years. And as a whole, this has been an offseason of sort of a youth movement. The
Yep.
signings that we'll talk about are all fairly young. The guys that are leaving are mostly on the older side. So, uh, probably about time. The thing I remember with Anzalone is how bad he was that first like year to year and a half with the Lions, and then he got a lot better. He was kind of like he kind of rose and fell with the rest of the team in a lot of ways. Where as they got better, he got better. And then this past season, I thought was not as sharp as the prior years, and that kind of mirrored the whole team. I don't know. He was sort of their like the bellwether county of this team, or whatever you want to call it. How he was doing was kind of a proxy of how the team did. But certainly a well liked guy, was unmistakable on the field with the long hair, and we'll always remember him playing with a bionic arm in the Week 18 game against the Vikings
Yeah.
in the 24 season. So again, a guy that gave the team some good years, but it's now at the point where I think moving on made a lot of sense. And it's not like he was a world beater last year. Like it's not we're not losing a superstar linebacker. It should be replaceable in my mind.
Yep. And then this next batch are guys that were valuable depth pieces that some guys, like people were a little frustrated that the Lions let them go. Amik Robertson, who had about as Jekyll and Hyde of a year as you can possibly have. The Lions say, you know what, 2 years, 16 million that you got with the Commanders. That's just a little rich for our blood, especially with how they used the nickel position last year. It's kind of unclear what the Lions' plan is with that position because of how much they played 4-3, and it went so poorly. So I really hope they aren't doubling down on that strategy. But alas, Robertson's gone. Al-Qadim Muhammad, who became a fan favorite out of nowhere with the double-digit sacks that he racked up in like 3 games combined, and the other games he was kind of useless, but he was a valuable pass rushing presence. He goes to the Bucks on a 1 year deal up to $6 million, a little bit cheaper than I thought he was going to get. Although a lot of these edge rushers in free agency went for a little bit less than I was expecting. And Roy Lopez, he goes back to the Cardinals. He was the backup nose tackle. He was actually pretty good for the Lions. I really liked watching Lopez last year. And then Khalif Raymond. This one, I don't know if it's surprising, but he goes to the Bears, 3.5 million reunites with Ben Johnson. I complained a lot about Khalif Raymond last year, so I'm not necessarily upset to lose the quality that we got on punt return this past season specifically, but he was a very valuable leader in the locker room. Again, beloved by all his teammates. Amon-Ra made the post being like, man, like this is the side no one sees, like kind of thing. So of that group of free agents, so is there anyone that like surprised you or that you were sad to see go?
The one that's a bit of a bummer is Roy Lopez, at least for me, just
Mm,
because he was a nice depth piece, and they are right now just like it feels like they're a body short at defensive tackle. So if they could have kept him, that would have been preferable. But he did get a bit of a raise from the Cardinals, kind of substantially so, and he went back there. So it might just be a situation where that's where he wants to be, just from like a location aspect. So bummer, but it is what it is. None of these guys are ones where you're really feeling like, oh no, like we're we're cooked. We didn't keep him. Um, Amik Robertson had some moments with the Lions, like Anzalone will always have Week 18 against the Vikings. That performance against Justin Jefferson. Um, so that said, this year, and they kept Rock Yassin, who we'll get into in a second. I did not think there was any real difference in their play, to be honest. So that one's fine with me. Khalif Raymond, he was a funny guy. I remember when he was on the St. Brown Brothers show. It was an enjoyable listen, and he was a good punt returner. I enjoyed watching him play, but punt returners are pretty outside unless you're like Devin Hester, like it, you can just cycle through those, not the end of the world. The Muhammad one is interesting simply because I didn't know what contract he was going to get. Like I honestly had no clue. And as you mentioned, that one not a super large contract. So maybe they could have done it, but at the same time, you kind of have to pick a slant. I feel like where some fans are like, "Oh, we need pass rushers. We didn't have anyone next to Hutch," and it's like, "Hey, I'll get in Muhammad Lee. Why did we let him go?" And it's like, well, you either didn't have an edge or you had one and you wanted to keep him. And I was on the standpoint of saying, if they had brought him back on this deal, I wouldn't be like, "Oh man, that's a waste of money." But I would still feel like they had real needs here because at the end of the day, a lot of his production came in a couple games. Useful rotational pass rusher, but they're still looking for more of those, and more importantly, they're looking for a true starter, which he wasn't. So not a big feeling either way.
Yeah, and then just going back to the note on Lopez, between him and DJ Reader being gone, if you needed any more proof,
Well,
Tyleek Williams.
we don't know that
Oh,
Reader's
sorry, fair. I guess DJ
he's
he's
somewhere.
well, DJ Reader is out in the abyss somewhere. Apparently, the Lions have been talking to his agent in some capacity, so that one remains to be seen. As of now, Tyleek Williams is your starting nose tackle. Seems like he'll be making the switch from three tech, maybe bulking up a little bit to become the full-time nose, and then we'll see what Ali McNeil could do with a full season and a full training camp a year removed from that injury. Uh, Aside from that, if we go to the re-signings now, the guys that the Lions kept around, there's the low-hanging fruit, the ERFAs, Jacob Sailors, Michael Neese, Nick Whiteside, Jake Bates. Bates still hasn't signed his tender, but he's not going anywhere. Jake Bates is your kicker. Nick Whiteside, when he got in that Legion of Whom game, was absolutely unbelievable, and then he like never played again, but it's good depth to have. Sailors, I swear to the holiest of deities, if he's on kick return duties next year, I think I might have to go down to Ford Field and do something about it. And then Nice, I don't think he'll make the team at this rate with how many interior offensive linemen the Lions are racking up now. But again, good competition to have in camp. The bigger ones, Malcolm Rodriguez comes back, special teams ace. Nowaski, more of a special teams ace as well. But Rock Ya-Sin, the one guy that we just talked about that we really wanted to see back, another 1 year deal. This one up to $4 million. I think it's mostly guaranteed. He might have been the Lions' best corner last year, so I will not complain whatsoever about this.
Yeah, thumbs up on the Rock Ya-Sin deal. Like seeing that. Wasn't super expensive either, so it makes a lot of sense, especially with some injury uncertainty with Ennis Rakestraw and legal uncertainty, I guess you could say, about Terrion Arnold, which I don't think we ever talked about, but that was strange.
Yeah, well, I don't even know what to say about that saga. The Terry, like, so for those of you who didn't see this, I believe it was down in Florida. Terrion
Yep.
and his buddies, there was a situation where it was like aggravated assault charge or something of that nature for a retaliatory incident where Terrion is claiming innocence, but this kind of feels, I don't know, like I'm willing to believe he wasn't there, but I'm also willing to criticize him because if these people are in your life, nothing good is going to come out of it. And this kind of feels like it feels like time's a flat circle a little bit. It seems like we're getting back to the immaturity talks we had with JMO a couple of years ago.
It also feels like we're getting back to on a lesser scale, but the Cam Sutton saga. This is a couple times in what 3 years that Lions corners have been involved in legal trouble, so
Yeah,
that's
can
not
we?
great.
Yeah, so Terrion
I mean,
just
to be clear, he has not been charged with the crime nor arrested. His name appeared in a court document.
She's probably yeah, probably a person of interest. Like that, this guy was in the like knows these people, was maybe affiliated with these people, but not part of the actual incident. Still, just cut those people out of your life, please. We don't need to deal with any incidents in the future.
Yeah, so within that context, bringing Rocky Yassin back made a lot of sense to me. The other guys, I mean, Tom Kennedy, I looked it up. He played in the 2019 season, so I think he is the longest tenured. I looked at the 2020 roster, and it appears that he is the longest tenured. Skipper was on the 2020 team. We didn't mention him, but he's
He's a
retired
coach
now
now.
and he's coaching. So
Yeah,
uh, looks like Tom Kennedy's the longest tenured Lion. So shout out to him. He'll be good for 3 catches for 23 yards this season and a really
and
good
I
preseason.
was gonna say preseason. Although we discovered last year he kind of got usurped by Isaac Tesla in the preseason Hall of Fame category. So
Yeah,
we'll
but
see what
Sasla's
happens.
leveled up. I think he probably won't get
Yeah.
as much of a run this preseason. So the other guys, I mean, Nowaski, whatever, he's fine. Rodriguez made a lot of sense to bring him back. He was not as good as he had been previously coming back from the ACL. So hopefully he can improve. I'm not really sure if he'll be starting in 4-3 packages or what exactly the plan is here, but he's a
As of
useful
now.
enough. Sure. He's a useful enough depth linebacker, and it's cheap enough that it makes sense to me. And then Whiteside, I should mention, like obviously you said he only really appeared in that one game, but he played well enough in that one game that I feel
Unbelievable. He
like
had like three
he,
PBUs in that one game.
Yeah, feels like you might as well bring him back based on that. I mean, he's not a guy that, he may be on the active roster, maybe on the practice squad, but when you have someone like that that has played a game of that caliber, well, why not? I mean, he's a local
Yep.
guy, so keep him around.
Yeah. And so moving on to some of the other stuff, I forgot to mention, we talked about last time how the Onwuzurike and Pascal contracts rolled over because of they were hurt. The Lions said enough with Josh Pascal and decided to cut ties with him. So the Lions are just mostly fully resetting at edge, and they're still in the process of rebuilding that room, but they did make one signing that we'll talk about. As for the external signings, the Lions starting off, Kyle Allen decided to go elsewhere, so the Lions were in need of a new backup quarterback, and Teddy Two Gloves is back in Detroit after 1 year with Tampa. He said, you know what? Why not? Let's go back to Detroit, which is good. He was beloved in that locker room, so stable veteran presence that the Lions are familiar with. Probably maybe a little bit higher floor than Kyle Allen, but yeah, it's a backup QB. If we see him, we're screwed.
He's uh he's abandoning his life as a high school football fugitive to come back to the NFL full time. I did not realize how young he was until a couple of days ago. I thought he was like 36 or 37,
No, he's
and I
maybe
think
like
he's
32 or something.
yeah, he's 32 or 33. So I mean, he started for the Vikings like when Calvin Johnson was on the Lions. Like he's been around a long time, and
He was starting for the Vikings? Was it the 20? I forget which year it was, but the year that the Vikings lost on the Blair Walsh
Blair
missed
Walsh, yes, yes.
the 10-yard field, whatever. Like
Yeah,
I
that and
think
that was 2015, I think. I mean, that was a long time
oh,
ago, and he's still in the NFL. I mean, he just came in young. He was at Louisville, and I think 2012 was his last year there. So when you think about it, it starts to make a little more sense. Maybe it was 2013 was his final year, but anyway, he's young enough that sure, this sounds good
yeah,
to me. And at least compared to Kyle Allen, as you mentioned, if we have to see him, it's not good. If he has to play a game.
totally
Depends on
fine.
who it's against, but I think that they can win with him. Like again, they're probably not going to be Buffalo with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, but if they're playing the Jets or the Giants or a game in that vein, they can probably win that with him. And I didn't necessarily feel that way with Kyle Allen personally. Like he's okay, but he doesn't have the experience that Bridgewater does.
The other thing too is we need a quarterback that can just throw accurate passes in the preseason to get these guys reps, and we did not have that last year. So that for that alone, I'm grateful. Like that's all we need.
Yeah, so that's an upgrade in my mind for sure.
Yeah.
Good job. Happy to see him back.
Moving right along, the Lions obviously needing a replacement for David Montgomery. They decide to go on. Now, I gotta say, most of this free agency was just the Brad Holmes classics. Like, we're gonna buy low on guys that are unproven or injured and pay them like no money for 1 year, and we're gonna see what happens. First on that list, Isaiah Pacheco, the former Chiefs running back, who had it was a broken leg of some kind a year and a half ago, was recovering from that this season. Was okay. He was okay. Looked like he lost half a step. The Lions are going to take a chance on him. He lacks a lot of vision, but if you just put him in short yardage situations, he will give you. It's the whole. If you need 2 yards, he'll get you 2 yards. If you need 5 yards, he'll get you 2 yards. The one curious thing is the Chiefs never used him inside the 5 yard line, which is bizarre for someone who was so good in short yardage situations. The Lions will probably use him a little bit more, but this is not going to be a committee backfield. It is the Jahmyr Gibbs show now.
Yeah, hard to see Isaiah Pacheco ripping off that 75-yard run that Dave Montgomery had against the Chargers
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. Like that's not necessarily his style, but in terms of a short yardage back, this is fine. I didn't watch him a ton last year to really know what exactly the situation was because when he was on the Chiefs when they were winning the Super Bowl and that
He
sort
was
of thing,
good.
he was good. Yeah, I really liked
Yep.
him. I mean, I remember him back at Rutgers. He was just a good hard running back. Like he really ran hard
Oh yeah.
and knew how to fall forward for the extra yard and all that kind of stuff. And if he can just kind of do what he did in the first few years at Kansas City and be good for 8 carries a game or something, it seems perfectly reasonable. I mean, they still have Sione Vaki, but they haven't really used him at running back much in the NFL. Craig Reynolds is gone, so it's certainly possible they could draft a running back in some form in the later rounds, like a Jermar Jefferson sort of guy that
Yeah.
could be RB3. But I think Pacheco will probably be the backup, and that's fine. Like I this is something we'll probably talk about a little later, but I think Lions fans have forgotten like who the good players on the team are a little bit. And it's like, oh, we don't have we downgraded from Montgomery to Pacheco, and it's like, yeah, but they have Jameer Gibbs. Like that's why the backup isn't as good as they have an all-pro running back. Like that if you have a superstar
Yeah.
starter, you don't necessarily need a superstar backup.
You think Falcons fans are bent out of shape about losing Tyler Algier? No, they have Bijan Robinson. Like, at a certain point, it's like, was he a good player? Yes. Do you have an even better player? Also, yes. So let's relax. Now, I understand the concerns about Jahmyr Gibbs' workload. Totally
Sure.
valid. But especially now that Gibbs is going to be probably one of the two or three highest paid running backs in all of football, you have a little bit more risk there because you're allocating more dollars to the running back room and you are exposing yourself potentially. But deal with that if it comes up. It's going to be the Gibbs show. He's a top, well, he's consistently, for the last 2 years, he's consistently been the second best back in the league. 2 years ago, Saquon was the best. Last year, Bijan was, it was the best. And now Gibbs is set to be a top three running back once again as the line, and that was with a bad offensive line this past year. So I don't understand the criticisms there. Like Pacheco's there to do one thing, and he will do that one thing. If he has to be the full-time starter, okay, maybe that's a bit of a problem, but oh well. Uh, Moving on with some of these other depth signings. Lions bring in tight end Tyler Conklin to compete with Brock Wright for the tight end two job. Pretty simple mercenary style deal. Larry Borum is brought in at tackle, 1 year, $5 million deal. Now, this is kind of a people were reacting very interestingly to this one because Borum is not the starter. He's mostly gonna he's like an upgrade on Skipper in the depth tackle role to where if he needs to start, he can start and be fine. The idea is you draft an edge, maybe Borum starts like the first couple of games, but then a rookie's gonna take over. And yeah, he's just kind of fine. He'll be perfectly acceptable for the price tag that he was acquired at.
Yeah, I've got no real issue with this Borum signing. I like it quite a bit, actually. Classic case of the guy, if he starts 3 games for you, 2 games for you, that's fine. If he starts 17, that's an issue. So, again, as I said during the Decker part of this podcast, it's hard to imagine now that they won't be using a premium pick on an offensive tackle. It just seems like that's in the cards at this stage. And if it is, then I think this is really good, like as terms of a backup tackle. We put him alongside Juice Scruggs, again, a guy that has started some like Borum. Those are two players that are sliding in, and if you drafted an offensive tackle to be your starter, you're rebuilding the depth in a way that is actually really nice on the offensive line. And I think you look at last season, Lions fans of all fans should be aware of how important depth is in this league after the last 2 seasons. And if you remember that game on Christmas Day, which hopefully you don't because you're doing something better, but
Yeah.
for those that do, they couldn't block like at all in that game. I mean, they were playing a mostly backup offensive line. They had Kingsley Aguakon and Tristan Colin and some other names that were having to play during the second half of last year that just can't play in the NFL. And that really hindered them in some of their most important games. And you're replacing some of those names who are guys that people have not really ever heard of. I'd never heard of Tristan Colin. Suddenly he was having to play. Um, with a guy like Scruggs, who's started some games in the NFL. I'm not going to say he's a world beater, but he's started games.
He's a guy.
And right. And Larry Borum has started games, and that's an important thing to have in your backup positions. And so if you go into the year with those two guys and then Miles Frazier at guard and then Gio Manu as another tackle and maybe there's one other draft pick of some kind and that's your two deep, your second string, that's really good. That's a really good backup offensive line.
Yeah, the question is just going to become how many offensive linemen are they going to carry on the roster? And the Giovanni Manu conversation is interesting because He's probably the ninth, 10th, assuming they draft a tackle, he's the ninth or 10th
He's the
guy.
ninth. Yeah, yeah.
And if you're drafting a tackle in the first round, you're not drafting him with the idea that, hey, this developmental guy we took in the fourth round a few years ago is gonna be our long-term starter. Like Giovanni Manu's, like that would be accepting to an extent that Manu is not going to be a starter in this league, or at least not for you. So maybe Manu develops into the backup tackle. Borum only signed a 1 year deal. So if Manu can develop into the skipper role where it's like you can play both sides and you can be adequate, okay. But time is running out pretty quickly for this Manu experiment, and it's starting to feel a lot more like a Broderick Martin type of deal than some of the other experiments that worked out.
It certainly is going to be a big off season, that's for sure. For Manu, big training camp, all that stuff. But that's again, that's the plus side of making these kinds of signings is it gives you competition
Yeah.
and it creates a little pressure. Borum's also a local guy, we should note. Product of Brother Rice. I actually have a friend that was a classmate of his up there, so
Hmm.
that's kind of fun. Um, and yeah, I mean it he's sort of filling in this in the skipper capacity, and I think it's an upgrade as a whole. So I did like what they've done on the oh well, it's not sexy, it's not going to get fans really excited or anything, but I think it's important.
Yeah. Then moving along to some of the other depth guys. This one just came down the wire like an hour before we start recording. But Damone Clark, the former LSU linebacker who of infamously had a spinal fusion surgery his draft year, which caused him to slide pretty far in the draft before getting drafted by the Cowboys. Started some games, was a decent contributor, but in his fourth year, he was waived. The Texans pick him up, and now the Lions. This is a classic Brad Holmes move. Guy that has a lot of talent, has a lot of leadership acumen to him, and was touted as a very good leader back in that time, and is now going to bolster the depth a little bit, maybe compete for some will snaps, but he's going to be a core special teamer to replace Grant Stewart, essentially.
Yep. Grant Stewart replacement was the first thing that came to mind. Obvious connection here with Kelvin Shepard, who was doing some work with LSU when Clark was there. Again, I'm all in favor of signing guys that have had starting experience, and we can make our jokes about the spinal fusion thing and then Brad Holmes and injuries and blah blah blah. But I will say that he is younger, and that's a theme across a lot of these guys.
Yep.
Guys and still in their mid 20s roughly, and Clark's only 25. So from that standpoint, fine by me. They needed to get a depth linebacker in, and they did that.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe the Lions will draft a certain edge rusher that'll be older than some of these free agents. Who knows? But next on the list, a new nickel to replace Amik Robertson, Roger McCreary, the former Titans slash Rams corner. Again, 1 year deal, dirt cheap contract, no risk, all upside for a starting caliber nickel for the Lions. This seems pretty cut and dry. He's going to be solid. He won't be great. He'll be perfectly acceptable for what he is.
Yeah, this is one of those deals where it's kind of like, are we missing something? Like, how did we get this guy at this
Yeah.
contract? Like, that's surprisingly cheap. Because this is a player that was pretty regular for Tennessee. Started all 17 games as a rookie, then 11 the next year, then 7 the year after that, and then 3 starts for Tennessee in 2025. Then traded to the Rams at the deadline, and they gave up not not much, but the Rams were willing to pick him up, saw enough from him there, and obviously we know Holmes and the Rams and the connections and all that stuff. So a guy that can come in and can play some nickel, and that likely means that the next guy we'll talk about is probably more of a safety, but it's building up that second string in the DB room pretty similarly to how they built up the offensive line room.
I will say with this signing, it does feel like McCreary kind of fell victim to he was a good nickel in Tennessee, and then the Rams were like, "What if we try you at outside corner?" And it didn't go as well. He's a nickel. He's a bit one-dimensional, but the Lions need guys like that. And then, as you alluded to, next up on the list is former Buccaneers nickel slash safety Christian Izien, I believe is how you pronounce that name. Again, 1 year deal, pretty much nothing on the salary cap. Like it, both of these just young, high upside, next to no risk bets, and we're gonna have competition. That's the theme here.
Yeah, I mean Christian Izien is a second Rutgers signing of the offseason for the Detroit Lions. So you know, fans of the Scarlet Knights here, and guy that can play a couple positions and has played a bit in the NFL as a whole. Also young, another guy born in 2000. That's three straight signings we've talked about of guys born in 2000. And the Bucks as a whole have had pretty decent pass defenses the last few years. They've had some good players there like Winfield and Jamel Dean, and so I think coming from that team and that defense is not the worst place. And so now he can fill in kind of where you need him to. And if they make one more safety signing and bring back a certain person that we'll talk about in a second, then I feel like they're actually in a pretty good spot with the second string DB group between Rakestraw and Izien, and then you still have Thomas Harper and
Well, hold on.
Whiteside. I mean,
Well, hold on. We don't know if Hennis Rakestraw exists, so
the theory of Ennis Rakestraw, but they've got a bunch of bodies now, and I think it's looking a little more robust. I like the offensive line. I feel a little more comfortable with that depth than where they were at last season. Which, at the end of the day, with where they're at as a franchise, is probably what the main objective in free agency is.
yep. And then the penultimate guy that we'll talk about before getting to the big fish, big fish for the Lions, is they finally made a move at edge, bringing in DJ Wanham from the Panthers, 1 year deal up to 6 million, very similar to the Al Qadim Muhammad contract, but he fills the exact opposite role of Al Qadim Muhammad. Wanham is more of a run defender who can give you some pressure, but this is more of a Josh Pascal slash Marcus Davenport replacement where it's again, the idea is you bring in a rookie who's maybe got some more pass rush chops. One of them can take the early down snaps. You can allow a rookie to focus more on just getting to the quarterback. So as a three, I like it. If he's a starter, eh, it's fine. Wouldn't love it.
Yeah, seems to be some obvious similarities to Pascal. Regarded as a decent run defender. I saw Justin Rogers was doing a film breakdown, and he's like, "Oh, I like the run defense stuff." And then this morning, he's like, "I just looked at the pass rush tape, and oof." It's kind of like, well, that sounds like Josh Pascal to me. So, not a ton of money on this contract, as you mentioned. A rotational guy plays early downs. It is fine. If there's one plus to him compared to Pascal and Marcus Davenport, especially, it's that Wanham has played a lot of football. He's been very
Yes, he
consistently
has.
healthy, logged a ton of snaps, and we do not need more run-ins with very injured guys. So from that standpoint, fine. It's probably and it's an upgrade on Pascal simply because he will lace up the cleats this year.
Hey, whoa, wait. Let's not say that too early now.
Yeah, I know.
That's
Cross our fingers.
Yeah, well, if that, well, now when he tears his ACL in minicamp, you can blame Alex. The one guy that the Lions signed that was longer than a 1 year deal on this list, center Cade Mays coming over from the Panthers, a 3 year, $25 million deal, which is less total money than Tyler Linderbaum got per year. So, to put that into context, everyone that was clamoring for the Lions to go out and get the big fish, you get a guy that is a fraction of the cost, maybe a lot more specialized, but there is some upside here with Mays. Seems like at the moment he's more of a run blocker, especially in a gap scheme, which does fit what the Lions like to do. A lot of duo, a lot of gap. Pass protection maybe leaves some things to be desired in general, but we have to remember we're comparing it to last year's Graham Glasgow. So pretty significant upgrade there.
Yeah, I mean, the first things you read about him, it definitely quickly came into view as to why they made this signing in terms of his schematic fit with what the Lions are trying to do. They bring in Drew Petzing, whose whole thing is trying to get back to running power and counter and a bunch of other gap stuff. And then the the scouting reports on Mays quickly say, oh, this is his forte. This is where he's better utilized. So I think from that standpoint, makes sense. His grading and like the PFF grade and stuff is a little bit better than Glasgow, and he's a lot younger. So if we're projecting the next 3 years, We would expect Mays to be significantly better than Glasgow over that period. Certainly plausible that the Lions could still draft in OL with center potential. Not high in the draft, but maybe in the in a later round or something. But it removes the immediate need for that. And I think with the Mays signing, you come out of this free agency period feeling like there's really two needs that have to be addressed, and that are edge and offensive tackle. Those are the two. And then everything else, they've done a pretty good job of rounding it out where you're in a position where you don't have to get somebody. And I would expect Mays to be the starter. He played in Carolina, which was allegedly a playoff team. So, for whatever that counts for.
Hey, they almost beat the Rams. I will. They beat the Rams in the regular season, and they almost pulled off something incredible in the playoffs. So you know what? We will have no Panthers slander on this show.
He's been there before. He's been to the dance, and he comes in and will play for Hank Fraley, and maybe that fixes him up a little bit too.
Well, and my favorite part is as Pride of Detroit did a series where they were asking Panthers writers and media members about him, and one of the most important things to me that they said, smart. And how many times did we talk about the miscommunication
Yeah,
up front, especially in those Vikings games? You can't repeat that. So you need someone who's going to be able to identify the different things up front and be able to communicate that effectively. Mays seems like he's going to be able to do that. So that's you get a tip of the hat from me. I will not complain. Now, as for some of the guys that the Lions are that are currently unsigned that were on the roster last year, the one that sticks out like a sore thumb is Avonte Maddox. And I know that you really like Maddox. We talked about Izzy and maybe being able to replace that role, but this just seems like such a surefire, especially with the questions at starting safety with Kirby and Branch. This seems like a slam dunk to bring Maddox back, no?
I have said that since before free agency that this was something they should do. He's only 29. Well, he's about to be 30 in a couple weeks, but that's still young enough that it's fine. He played pretty well for the team last season, particularly went out with a bang, a strong performance in that final game against Chicago. Local guy, there's really no reason for it not to make sense to me. And maybe there's just a situation where both sides are trying to find a price that makes sense, but they should. And if you do, then again, really nice spot that you've gotten in terms of your secondary two deep, and that doesn't to me stick out as an immediate need in the draft. Not that it wouldn't be taken, but you'd be in a very nice spot as a whole.
Yeah, so the Lions, as of now, like you said, they're kind of fine at most positions on the roster. Now, obviously, it's been a relatively quiet free agency for Detroit, which is not a bad thing. A lot of the best teams in football have quiet free agencies. That's why teams like the Raiders or the Titans are the ones spending $250 million on day one because they're bad and they need really good players. And so they spend up for the really good players. But with that said, are there any moves that you saw from around the league that you sat back and were like, man, I wish the Lions would have done that? Like, was there an edge defender that had caught your eye, or was there any more substantial move on the offensive line or at any position that you were like, you know what, I wish the Lions would have just ponied up for that?
Not really, just because I didn't foresee them being super aggressive. And like the Tyler Linderbaum stuff, he got a massive contract. Like that
Insane.
that one was never really feasible. And obviously, the Lions don't have the money to pay Jalen Phillips like the deal he got with Carolina.
Yeah, he got so much.
The reality is that you look at free agency every year, and the teams that are active are usually not very good. They are the ones that have the cap space because they've got younger teams, guys on rookie deals, or they just suck and they don't have star players on expensive contracts. I mean, you think about the biggest free agent signings the Lions have made in memory. I think Trey Flowers is still the biggest. That was not on a that was not on a very good Lions team. Um, Even like going back to the when they signed Glover Quinn and Reggie Bush, which I think was the 2012 into 13 off season. They were coming off a 4-12 season. That tends to be what free agency does. It reassigns players from good teams to not as good teams. And the Lions are not, despite finishing fourth in the division, they're not at that part of the food chain. And so maybe you could find a nitpick here and there, but I like how they addressed their needs as a whole and improve the depth. And it's kind of what we said before free agency after the season ended, which is that the draft was always going to be the biggest
Yeah.
infusion of premium talent on this roster, just based on where they are. They have expensive players. They have more players that will be expensive in the future. They need to get premium players who are cheap, and you do that through the draft.
Yep. And that's where the draft conversation gets a little interesting because the Lions, they have the 17th overall pick. That's a premium pick. You should be able to get a very good player with that pick. They picked Jack Campbell 18th a few years ago. Well, we all remember like that. You should be able to get a real good impact player. They have the 50th overall pick in the second round. They don't have a third round pick at the moment. They have two fourths, two fifths, two sixths, and a seventh. There is no way that they are making that many day three picks. They will trade up into the third round or trade up higher into the second round, or maybe even in round one. But I will say, coming out of free agency, I was like 100% convinced they were going to trade up before free agency. Now I'm like, you know what? Maybe the idea is just get as much competition going as possible because this really feels like a return to basics kind of like a back to basics kind of year for the program in terms of just rebuilding the identity of the team back to what they want it to be.
Yeah, it's a bit of a youth movement as a whole with this team. We said all those guys that they let go were on the older side. A lot of the signings are on the younger side, and now they have a chance to really just pump in a bunch of new picks that will make the team a little more youthful as well. I agree in terms of trading up. That seems extremely likely. The pick numbers themselves for those later picks are 118, 157, 181, 205, 213, and 222. So you've got four between 181 and 222. No reason for that. You- Package a few of those together and see if you can move up. I will note with the 17th pick, that's a nice pick, but at the same time, if you get to that spot and you feel like some of the targets you're looking at could still be there in a few picks later, I wouldn't be opposed to trading down. Load up a
I
little bit more, and then it gives you more ammo to move up in the later rounds.
I'm 100% on team trade down unless there's a real superstar that like slips to like pick 12 or something that you're like,
Right.
I need to get this guy. Trade down because A, you could get a third round pick just like that. But I also would be targeting picks in the 2027 draft that is supposed to be a little bit more loaded than this one. This draft is not as it doesn't have as many as much star talent, but it's deep. It has a lot of starting caliber players, a lot of good depth pieces that you'll be able to get in the later rounds, but not as many stars. If you can entice someone, if you can pull off a Rams type move where a couple of years ago they trade down and they're able to get a future first from Atlanta, and now the Rams, who just went to the NFC Championship game, have like the 12th overall pick. If you could trade down to the late 20s or maybe even the 30s and you can get an extra one, I would be on board with that.
Yeah, the only question to me is just if you were prioritizing tackle with your first round pick, which is
Yeah.
probably what I would do, simply because that's a position where it tends to be high picks that are the
Yep.
best players. You just don't see a lot of fourth round tackles that become
No.
stars. I went through at the end of the season like the most recent Pro Bowl, All Pro selections over the past 5, 6 years at
My
tackle.
Lotta
It's
or something.
almost all first rounders. Yeah, Milata is like the one that's not, and everybody else is a first rounder in some form. And the Lions were right around this spot in the draft when they picked Taylor Decker back in the
Yep.
day. I
Yeah.
think he was picked 16, maybe, so it was right around there. But if you're in a position where other teams aren't prioritizing tackle, and you feel like, there could be some at 24, 25, something like that, then a trade down definitely makes sense. If there's a run on tackles, then yeah, you probably have to just stick at 17 and take one there if that's going to be how you go forward. You never want to be in a position where you're sort of locked into having to take one specific position in the draft just because it limits your ability to find
Yeah.
value and stuff like that. But this is an important need. So they'll have to balance that stuff out. That said, trading down with other picks or moving around and just trying to continue to stockpile assets. I think this being a plus pick draft would be good after a couple drafts where they mostly traded out more than they traded in during the draft process. Last year, they gave up a lot for the Tesla trade up,
Yep.
and they've done that a few times. I'd like to see this be one where they're focusing on adding more trade or adding more draft chips because the importance of rookie contract players is only going to get bigger and bigger as they continue to have to extend some guys and the team ages more.
Yeah, exactly. And like I mentioned earlier, the whole idea with a lot of their free agent moves is it's guys that just finished their rookie contracts, 1 year mercenary deals. So now you got to bring in the next wave of young guys as well. And you just need to get as much competition going for these spots because competition is going to breed success. That's how the Lions made such a drastic jump from 21 to 22 when they were one of the worst and most least talented rosters in all football going into that first Dan Campbell year. And in a year and a half, they became one of the best up and coming teams in all of football. So you need competition. And it seems like with the volume of picks, even if it's more like round four, round five guys, you're going to have more bodies in camp. And the Lions don't have a lot of guys on the roster. So there will be more free agent signings. And I like the by the time you guys hear this, it'll be Thursday morning. So who knows? Maybe they've signed someone else by the time this goes up. But it's all about getting the reinforcing the depth because, again, as Alex said earlier, we Lions fans know better than anyone how important depth is after the hell that has been the last 2 years injury wise.
Yeah, and I think as a whole now, zooming out and looking at the roster, I think you go into the draft and you might want a wide receiver four.
Yeah.
Depends on how you feel about the options you have, but that's a possibility. Like maybe an RB3, but not necessarily a big need. Uh,
Yeah.
I could see them drafting a tight end, but we didn't really talk a lot about Tyler Conklin. Like they still have Brock Wright, they still have Laporta. They may draft a late round tight end, but that's not like a super big need. And then you have the big need at tackle. You have a big need at edge. You probably need one more body at DT. That could be a signing, could be a late round pick. Who knows? And then you're looking pretty solid now at linebacker after getting Damon Clark. Like you could draft one, you don't have to. And then maybe a draft a safety if you feel iffy about the prognosis of your starters long term with health and stuff. But there's just it's just tackle and edge. Then everything else, just a couple guys here, a couple guys there. And as a whole, I think they're in a pretty solid position.
Yeah. So that's kind of the Lions prognosis. Is there anything I guess we should probably just mention this story because it's so wild that I think we kind of have to touch on it. What was your take on whatever on earth the Baltimore Ravens did with the Max Crosby trade, then just kidding, then signing Trey Hendrickson?
I mean, that was clearly that they didn't think Trey Hendrickson was available for them. Right? Like isn't that the logical explanation? They were gonna get Max Crosby, then they found out, oh, we actually could just sign Trey Hendrickson instead and not give up the draft picks. And then they made up some stuff about, oh, the medical files were worse than anticipated, so we're gonna have to back out of this one. Like the reality with NFL players is, we say this all the time. An NFL player could get a doctor to fail their physical at any point,
Yeah.
basically. Like it's if you want to find a way to wiggle out of a deal, you can find it in anyone's medical records that plays in this league. It's such a violent game. There's so many injuries. There's so many guys that play at far less than 100% that if you're trying to get out of a situation, it's not that hard. And the fact they pivoted very, very quickly to signing Trey Hendrickson, they have to be linked. I'm sorry. There's no other
Oh
way to
yeah.
view that.
I wonder. I guess it's more so I'm curious on the timing of it because if the Crosby trade was just a hedge against being able to sign Hendricks, I mean, first of all, what NFL GM is going to want to do business with the Ravens after that fiasco? The Raiders, man, it works out for them because they still had a little bit of like the money available to keep Crosby on board, but that could have gone very differently if they had spent a little bit more money, signed one or two extra contracts, and suddenly they're over the cap and they have to offload Crosby for like at least a bit of a discount just because suddenly they're desperate to get rid of his money. But seems like the Raiders at least get to keep their star edge for another year, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a bizarre story, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, the Raiders just tweeted something like, "The Ravens have backed out of our agreement.
Which I've never seen that before.
We will
Like
have no
this,
further comment at this time."
yeah, the Raiders were just fully like, look at them. It's not us. Look over there. They did this, and it's yeah, very bizarre saga. But yeah, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention that because that was probably the biggest story coming out of free agency. Aside from that, I mean, the Packers and Vikings didn't really do. I mean, the Vikings signed Kyler Murray to a vet minimum deal.
That's interesting. I mean, that's gonna be a very talked about quarterback battle in training camp.
Kyler Murray, who notably has zero career wins against the Lions. I think he's 0-4 and 1, 0-3 and 1 against the Lions in his career.
The tie
Uh,
was his first ever game, if I remember correctly.
Shout out Matt Patricia. 24-6, never forget. But the yeah, so that would be interesting. We'll see what happens with the Vikings situation. There was a trade yesterday. We can quickly mention the Miami Dolphins traded Jalen Waddle to the Denver Broncos in
Oh
exchange
yeah.
for it was like a first and a third or something, and the Broncos get a fourth back as well. The Dolphins now, as it stands, their highest paid player will carry a cap hit of $11.7 million this year. $11.7 million. They're over the cap. They have like 170 million in dead cap this year after getting rid of Tua and Waddle and Tyreek and everyone under the sun. So the Dolphins are going to be real bad next year, but that's by design. And then the Broncos, Jalen Waddle, there's a new explosive wide receiver for you, and that actually leads me to a Lions tie-in. You want your next punt returner slash wide receiver for Marvin Mims. Go throw one of your day three picks at the Broncos for Marvin Mims. He's in the last year of his rookie deal. Make it happen. That's my shout right there. I think John Whitaker was on that too. But the second that happened, I was thinking of that terrible movie Draft Day, where it's like, give me Marvin goddamn Mims just because I feel like it. But because there's a punt returner and a speedster if you want him. But yeah, no, the Broncos trying to capitalize on their, I guess, Super Bowl window. I say that term loosely because I don't know what the AFC is. It exists.
It's a
It's a
minor
thing.
league.
It's something. And the NFC, it's crazy how much the dynamics between the AFC and NFC have changed in like 2 years. Because 2 years ago it was the NFC that, or like 3 years ago, it was like the NFC that was a complete joke. And now it's the AFC that's like, okay, what is even the point of any of you?
Yeah,
So,
definitely a switch there. But I like seeing the Broncos go for it. I mean, they were in a position where they probably should have made the Super Bowl. You know, if Bo Nix doesn't
yeah.
take the kneel down, they could have been toast instead of the Patriots, and maybe getting an upgraded wide receiver is gonna put them in a position where they would fare better if they do make the Super Bowl. So that's kind of interesting. I feel like we should talk just quickly about the fan base as a whole before we wrap the
Sure.
show up because it's been kind of the big story is just how cranky everyone is. I mean, I went through the Colton Pouncey did his like depth chart in the Athletic yesterday, and I went through the comments, and the top comment was a guy trying to speak some reason, but then every other comment below that was just like, "Oh my God, we have so many needs," like blah 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 blah, and that's kind of been the overriding theme. Certainly, the last week has just been a lot of like, "What are we doing? Where are the signings?" Like it's just
Yeah.
a very upset off season as a whole.
Now, this is something I've kind of noticed throughout. Now, first of all, this we have to clarify. These are Twitter fans, and Twitter fans are inherently reactionary and cranky about everything. I guess my not theory, but my question is, what is the different? Like, how much crankier are Lions fans than every other fan base on Twitter that's always whining and complaining about something, right? So, like, we've talked about this before, where Detroit sports fans as a collective are just wanting big things to happen. And they are like, give us big trade. We want splash signing. We want to do something notable. We want to be the talk of the town for, or talk of the world for a week or two because of a big move, right? Like we don't like that the Packers get Micah Parsons and suddenly everything's about the Packers again. We don't like that we missed out on Quinn Hughes and Minnesota's the talk of the town for a little bit. We don't like right, like we could do this with every single one of them, where every Detroit sports fan has something to be cranky about, but Detroit sports is also in a pretty good place right now, so maybe shut the fuck up.
I think it's permeating from obviously a disappointing season, and I was the one
Yeah.
that said it was disappointing, and I've been all over that. But I don't. I feel like people are a little bit losing the forest for the trees to some degree, in that this is a team that did go 9-8. It was the
Yep.
fourth consecutive winning season for the franchise,
It's like the first
and
time since the 60s or something.
yeah, long time since that had happened. And they were a team that, while they finished 9-8, they had a sharply positive point differential. They were supposedly one of the greatest teams to not make the playoffs, according to DVOA. We can debate that. But in terms of the fancy stats and all of the metrics you look for to indicate that this team is actually good, um, they were there. So they're not super far away. There are things that need to improve, and some things that need to change to get back to where they need to be. But people, I think, are portraying it like the team was miles and miles away. And I think the first place you have to look is the fact that they went 2-0 against the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears were 12-5, if I remember correctly. They won the division, and or they were 11-6, not 12-5, but they won the
Close enough.
division, and they were pretty close to making the NFC Championship game. They had the ball in overtime with the next score wins. So I don't think the Bears were that incredible of a team. I watched them. I was like, they're not that good, and yet they won a playoff game and
Voodoo
almost.
magic. That was the most like black magic Caleb Williams BS. Well, there's the Caleb Williams giveth and the Caleb Williams taketh away at the biggest moments.
Yeah, and the teams that make deep runs are not necessarily perfect. This is not people I think it's too much of like 2015 college football where it's like we have to have a
Mhm.
superstar at every position and five layers of depth. And that's just not how it works. Most teams in the NFL, you want some superstars, you want good starters at the other positions. That's about what you can ask for. Nobody's got this ironclad second string offensive line ready to step in the moment injuries come. Like no one's got Pro Bowl corner sitting on the bench ready to come in if the first guy gets hurt. Like NFL teams are just trying to scrape by and get to where they can. And the Lions were in a position a few years ago where they had a pass defense that couldn't stop anybody down the stretch, and they were almost in the Super Bowl if a couple of
Arguably
things not
should
even
have
related.
been.
A couple of things not even related to the fact that pass defense was terrible, and they were basically there. So you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough. And they were 9-8, and they had lost some games last year that they should not have lost. They should not have lost those two to the Vikings. They probably shouldn't have lost to the Eagles, if we're being honest, in that game. The Steelers
Yeah.
game was not great. I mean, there were some things that slipped away, but they aren't that far off. They need to improve some things, maybe schematically and coaching wise, a little bit better health, and just round some things into form. And you look at that schedule for this coming season, you can ask the question yourself: how many games are they going to be an underdog in this coming season? It's very few.
Yeah.
That is a very favorable schedule. And this is a team that still has a lot of good players. That's why they were 9-8. Like, you might not feel great about Isaiah Pacheco, but we have Jameer Gibbs. Like, we need a wide receiver for, yeah, but we have an all pro and then,
With
borderline,
2,000-yard receivers.
right, 2,000-yard receivers. Like, we're not sure what's going on with Sam Laporta's back, but when he's healthy, he's really good. And You still have Penei Sewell on your offensive line, and Jared Goff is
Yep.
still very good, and you still have Aiden Hutchinson and Jack Campbell, and go down the line. They have a lot of really good players. That's why they couldn't do a lot in free agency. They have a lot of really good players.
I the one thing is like, yeah, again, guys, 9-8's the floor now. That is an incredible place to be if 9-8 is your floor. The one thing coming out of the Super Bowl, and this is not any disrespect to Sam Darnold, he just won the Super Bowl. I never want to hear anyone complain about Jared Goff again. Sam Darnold just won the Super Bowl, and you're gonna try to tell me that Jared Goff can't? Get out of here, man. And it it was funny too because it was coming out of the 23 season when they lost in the NFC Championship. People were complaining about Goff. Goff was the only part that didn't fall, like guy that didn't fall apart in the second half against the Niners. Like, and he was incredible in that playoff run. So I people are always going to have things to complain about, but at the end of the day, this is as literally as good as Lions football has been in half a century. Like,
Yeah, and I don't think, as we talked about in this show, that they subtracted a ton of really good talent. Like right now, they lost some contributors, but they signed some guys that should contribute, and they have an opportunity with the draft to patch some of these things up. And if they have a good draft, they will be right back towards the top of the league. They may be anyway, with the schedule being what it is, but
hmm,
certainly those reinforcements will help. And I think ultimately the reality is they have a lot of their assets tied up and they need guys on this roster to contribute. Like,
yep.
I get it would be great to sign a star defensive tackle, but we have a $30 million defensive tackle and we just spent a first round pick on a defensive tackle. Those guys
Yep.
need to deliver. You don't get infinite shots
Yeah.
at stuff. So I know with the injuries, it's nerve wracking and it's. I was not a fan of how Lee McNeil played, but I do believe that with an extra year, he can regress back to what he was consistently before the injury. And if he doesn't, well, we're screwed anyway. Like there's nothing you can do in that situation.
Yeah.
Like
That like
you
this is like the golf conversation. It's like, well, if golf goes
yeah.
down, we're screwed anyways. Well, yeah, you lost your starting quarterback. That's gonna like anyone would be screwed if they like
Yeah, it's like, oh, we got to sign some star quarterback in case the guy we drafted first overall at quarterback sucks. It's like if your first overall quarterback sucks, you're finished. Sorry. Like that's
yeah.
you only get so many shots at it. You only have so much cap space. You only have so many picks. And the same thing at corner. Like they signed a corner last year on a decent deal in DJ Reed. They have a first round and
Yep.
second round corners, and they paid Kirby Joseph already. This isn't the NHL. A guy gets hurt, you don't just get to clap and make the contract go away and sign some super expensive player to entirely replace him. Like that, you still have to. There's dead cap if a guy retires, and there's all kinds of considerations. And I think the fact they haven't addressed safety drastically suggests that they don't think Kirby is totally dead. That would be my guess. But
Same with Branch.
yeah, there's some uncertainty across the group, but when the guys they have are really good, and if just enough of the injured guys can come back and contribute, they'll be in good shape. Like we just need to calm down and let the offseason pass, have a nice draft, and then be ready to go. And I hope that they come hungry, and I think they will. As we mentioned, it's a
Yeah.
younger team. There's going to be more competition in camp. Some new coaches that should set a new tone, and they can hit the ground running.
Yeah. Because I and obviously, yeah, everything with the bad vibes started right away last year because the preseason was unwatchable with how bad they were. Week one was unwatchable with how badly the Packers were kicking them up and down Lambeau Field. Like everything just got started on such a sour note. Just gotta
Right
start.
from the
If
Hall of Fame game, honestly. Like,
yeah,
just weird stuff started from the beginning.
made
And
us play football in July. That was with a that was the first sign of trouble. But so we'll see what happens. But again, it's a long off season, guys. There's like kick back, relax. This is a good football team, and they're going to be good next year. So that's going to be where we wrap this
we
show.
we
Oh,
actually
you go.
have some news that just came across the wire that we have to
Oh, we
break
got a
live
new
on
one.
this show. Greg
Oh,
Dortch is a Detroit Lion. There's our wide receiver four. Don't need to draft that.
there you
Scratch it off
go.
the list.
There's the connection with Drew Petzing. So there we go. We caught it. That's incredible timing. We caught it literally last minute as we wrap the show. So Greg Dortch, he's a body. There's your Khalif Raymond replacement to an extent. He has punt return experience, I believe. So cool. We'll take it.
Yep. I mean, no need for a Mims trade, I guess. We got Greg Dortch. Perfectly solid wide receiver
That,
four. No
there you
issue.
go. So that's going to be where we wrap the show. Thank you so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, make sure you hit follow, leave us a review. You can follow the show at Payne and Drain on Twitter. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. And we'll catch you guys next time with some more Lions content. And until then, take care, everyone. Cheers.